call the meeting to order at 7:01. My goal for September is to make sure we actually start at 7, so I'm getting there. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Janet Evans. I am the chair of the CA Board of Directors. Please remember that this meeting is being live streamed. The agenda and background information for tonight's meeting are available on the CA Board webpage. I encourage you to follow along with those documents. Please mute your microphones when you're not speaking. Please be courteous to each other when you speak. First, state your name so that we know who is speaking, particularly those of you online. Speak clearly and slowly so that everyone can hear you. And please use the chat feature and/or hand raise to be recognized to speak. I will be introducing each item on the agenda, and voting will be held by roll call unless we think it's unanimous. Chair will restate motion before a vote is taken. I will now call the roll. So we know Sherry will not be with us tonight, so she's not here. Ginny?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Lynn? Lynn was not sure if she was going to be able to join us. I think she was not. Tina?
Yep.
Jess?
Thank you.
Okay. Not yet. Renee?
Here.
Andy?
Here.
And Lakey?
Here.
And me. Okay, we just have quorum. Okay, so tonight's timekeeper is Tina Horn. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ginny seconded, Ginny moved, Andy seconded. Are there any objections to tonight's agenda? Okay, unanimous. All right, next up is resident speak out. I will remind everyone that individuals have 3 minutes to speak, organizations have 5 minutes. And we had one resident tonight, Lena Kennedy. Lena, are you on the line? Okay, I do not see Lena online. And that was our only resident signed up to speak. So we will move on to board votes. So if you recall in our last meeting, we changed this from a work session to a board meeting so that we could vote on the position statement. So
Do you want a motion to remove it from the table?
do you have to remove it from the table? I thought you moved it to another meeting and that was moving it. Do we don't have to remove something from the table. It was moved.
Take it off the
Okay.
table? No?
Because it automatically went on the next agenda.
So that
Okay.
automatically, okay.
Andy, did you want to give an overview of, I think in the end you ended up summarizing some of the changes in that document. I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not prepared to. We don't have to, I think.
So, yeah, I will just say that I want to thank all of the members who provided comments at the meeting. And I want to thank Dick for putting it in a nice format. And basically what we did is reinforced a couple of areas with affordable housing, environment, making a focus on Columbia and its environs. And then the biggest change was probably just in the summary where we talked about putting in characteristics that underline Columbia's values that include a rational land use mix, meaningful open space, social and economic diversity, respect for the environment, distinctive neighborhood character, and our strong sense of place. So we specified that right in the summary. I think that's really kind of it.
Thank you. Can I ask one question? The section under preserving Columbia, number 2, it reads, "The greater Columbia community should be planned comprehensively without parcels and Newtown zoned land, ultimately subject to the same standards that embody a complementary aesthetic." So I was not sure what that meant. Are we saying that any standards applied within the county should then also be applied to Newtown zoning?
No, I think the one above it talks about development of a master community plan, sector plan for the greater Columbia area, including out parcels. And then therefore, that should apply then. So it's just the Columbia area that we were talking about, and having a specific.
Oh, okay.
Specifically a plan for the Columbia area and also a design manual for the Columbia area. And it was just kind of to reinforce that the Columbia area is bigger than just the Newtown. We've got a bunch of out parcels, and we also have places like Dorsey and Gateway that are not under Newtown.
Okay.
So that's what the thought was, that think of it as the Columbia area. And we just wanted kind of consistent within the Columbia area.
Okay.
30 seconds.
Thank you. Ginny, did you have amendments that you wanted to propose?
Just one, and I apologize, I was part of the subcommittee, and then I just got a few comments here. So this would be under transforming Columbia, if we're ready for that. That's the next to the last section, unless somebody had questions before that.
We don't have anybody in the queue currently?
Okay. Is basically delete what is here and instead substitute, and I had sent this to you this afternoon. It's 2 sentences. The transformation needs to comply with the village center plan developed under, I'm sorry. The village centers need to be transformed to respond to the latest market trends and demands for retail, recreation, housing that serve that particular community. The transformation needs to comply with the village center plan developed under CB 29 in 2009 that was submitted by a village to the county. That was a really involved process with each village, and that's a requirement of CB 29. Whether we like it or not, the residents would expect that any transformation be in compliant with that, and each village, of course, plan is different. And that we forgot about that. I know I had mentioned it at our board meeting, and then frankly, I forgot about it. And I know there are some problems with CB 29 where a lot of us think it needs amendments, but that's a subject for the Howard County Council. But the law does require that any development of a village center be in compliance with CB 29 as the village created it. And that there be a process where, spelt out in that, which it is on each plan, that the residents be involved in how they get involved in the transformation.
20 seconds.
Did you want to move?
So I move for the amendment.
I'll second it.
Okay, Jenny moved that the amendment be accepted. Dick seconded. Any discussion around the amendment itself?
I'll call the vote
Okay, call to vote
on the amendment.
on the amendment. Okay, I will do a roll call vote. Dick?
Yes.
Renee?
Yes.
Evans, yes. Horn?
Yes.
Sorry, Tina. I'm reading through last names here, apologies. Allen? Do we have Allen?
I don't think he's here.
I was going to say, he
He's
didn't,
not
you're
here.
right, okay.
At least I don't see him.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
All right. Did I miss anyone?
You have to vote.
I did.
She did.
I voted in the middle because I'm in the middle of this list.
Sorry.
So I'm not going to use this list because that's going to confuse me. So sorry about that. All right, that was unanimous? Okay. So can I have somebody move to vote on the overall position statement?
Move for approval of the entire statement as amended.
As amended.
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any seconds? Okay, do I have any objections to the Newtown position statement? Okay, so by a vote of 6-0, that motion passes. Thank you, subcommittee, for your hard work. Jess is running a little bit late, and she will be joining us shortly. Okay, so next up, under the work session topics, we have the proposed budget schedule for 2023.
I'd like to start. Susan Krabby is going to present the schedule, but I wanted to set the context a bit. As has been discussed previously in different forums, and I think before certainly my tenure started, but since my tenure has started, there has been a lot of conversation around the budget process and wanting to make changes to make it more, I think, both transparent but also participatory. So we have been working internally on how to revamp the public-facing portion of our budget process. And that kind of discussion and how we put it together is what Susan is going to go over. I wanted to make a blanket statement that this looks very different than what you have received in the past, and that is on purpose. So I just want to make that clear that we have gone at this a different way. The process itself is different. The look of it is different. The format of it is different. We are trying to get things a lot more streamlined so they are easier to understand in a digestible format.
45
Over
seconds.
time, we will be able to expand out the detail as it becomes finalized, but that's not where I want to put staff resources now. So, general statement.
And like, I just wanted to remind the board that this is something that the board has asked for input earlier in the process, and I think this approach is trying to support what we have asked for.
So there's a couple of things behind this.
Before you do that, does she get 2 minutes?
No, she gets as long as she needs.
Okay.
You can take a breather.
So this, a couple things would be, obviously this looks different and you're used to, I think, seeing things in a different order. So just to set the framework around this approach assumes that the draft budget will look more like a draft and less like a final. It will be a much simpler document. It will have to be in order to accommodate the schedule and the shift in focus. So it'll have less detail and be simpler. This does start with an expectation that the board will do some hard work at the beginning, establishing your strategic priorities and desired outcomes for the fiscal year at the beginning of the process. We will have to make some assumptions because we have, as you see, the votes on what the key attributes of the budget at the end with the budget. So, of course, in order to develop a draft or to develop scenarios for you to evaluate and take to the community, we'll have to make some assumptions about those things, like the annual charge rate and cap and things like that. But that they aren't locked in; they'll just be our working assumptions through the process. And this does, I think, and give you the opportunity to deliberate, to really evaluate alternatives a lot later in the process than you're used to. So that was a key goal. And it uses meetings and work sessions that are kind of already standard with some additions, but not a lot of changes. So there's the opportunity to add meetings or public forums or whatever you want. The framework here is built around kind of the standard 2 Thursdays a month structure. And then you see that some phases overlap or start over, reoccur. And obviously, that's the case for any analysis that staff has to do. That would occur a couple times in the process. And so there'd be this session at the beginning or the segment, the phase at the beginning to listen, for you to talk to your community, for us to have engagement opportunities with the entire community. Oops, sorry. And then we would do some work synthesizing that information and putting together some alternatives and scenarios. Take that back out to the community, reflect on that, and then we come back and refine it again. So that's just the framework, and we would be building that out over time, but that's the background and the framework.
Ginny?
Yeah, I'd like to compliment you. It is a significant change, and I'm excited about it, especially the fact that you have, community engagement and board reflection, and community engagement and board listening, and revisiting, months apart. But that'll be exciting to see what the content of those meetings really are. I'm not sure if I'm correct or not, but it was exciting to get your bill in the mail for the assessment.
Always a highlight.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, we were thrilled. But actually, it really was phenomenal. I mean, it was a change. I know there was some of this in the old approaches we used, but it was very informative, well designed. I thought, it was great. Tell us where the money's coming from and where it's going, and charts. I thought it was excellent.
Well,
frankly.
Lakey's leadership and the communications and design team.
Yeah.
are just
I mean,
credit for that.
it is a lot different from the last one, right?
1 minute.
Last one I sort of read and threw away, but this one I'm saving.
Went in the scrapbook.
Susan's team is excited to hear that.
Yeah, that's right. We don't want you to save it. We want you to pay it.
Yeah, right.
Oh, is that the idea? Now you
tricky.
tell me. Oh, they want the money too, huh?
Dick?
Yeah, I'd like to echo Ginny's comments. That really was a nice presentation. And Blakey, I like the way you brought the communications people in. They're doing a hell of a job. They're really doing a nice job. I had a question. When we get this community involvement, board reflection, have we worked out any details on that, or is that something to be determined? Any thoughts at this point on how that would take place?
So it is to be determined. I kind of mentioned that in an internal email, but it's probably helpful to say now. We are looking at this as a co-creation process. And so when you do it that way, we don't have all the details, at the beginning of July on December 11th, we're going to do this. We built in time that we know are targeted times that we want to have engagement activities, depending on obviously first what's going on, with COVID, but then also is that going to be in person? Is that going to be online? Is it going to be short surveys? There's also 2 points in the process, because one is more about priorities, and then one will be an actual draft that people are responding to. And you get very different engagement when you do that. But as we get closer, that will be an ongoing feedback loop with the board. Here's what we would suggest at this point, with plenty of advance notice to get the word out by the communications team.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
And Lakey, do you want, so if board members have suggestions, I mean, I don't want to go crazy here, but does it make sense to say, hey, if you have things off the top of your head, we can throw them out here if we have a few minutes? Or would
Meaning
you
about priorities or process?
I'm thinking about the process for listening and collecting. So, what are all of the opportunities? It seems like there are a lot of channels that could potentially be used for that. And so I'm just curious, how you would like that input, if people have ideas for what they would like to suggest?
I have heard some of that input, previously, but I think if we have time on the agenda, we certainly can hear that, so long as it's suggested kind of in a general way. And, again, there's a lot of tools. We're going to use different tools at different times. But if we have time on the agenda, otherwise, in a general way, I think if you want to just send me that information, On the July 22nd agenda, Tim will be giving a general update on communications and marketing. This obviously would be a significant piece of it. So we'll have another opportunity there as well.
So not to put you on the spot, but maybe if you have a list of tools in mind that you're already considering, you could throw those out so that people don't feel the need to suggest them again.
Okay, so I think pretty straightforward is going to be the tool that we're using to start a general conversation. So this is not budget specific. This is about what is valued in Columbia, and it's going to involve some positioning around what is the Columbia Association's role in the community and priorities. So as we do that, it will start to tease out some of those priorities will be related to budget. So that is a point of information for us. That tool is going to be a monitored forum. It is not going to be a moderated forum. We are not going to be going into that and guiding the conversation early on. We are listening. So I think that's very important to make clear.
5 minutes on this topic.
Thank you.
From there, we are going to be putting together a series of very short survey questions that will be much more what I'd call experiential, and I hope Tim thinks I'm doing this justice, that as you go to that page, it's going to be a really quick, yes or no, or rate something. Outside of that, we are going to be dedicating staff to what we call like a street team concept and getting a lot of information out with cards on driving people to the website, because that's going to be a tool that we'll continue to build out. In a general way, I would say surveys, and I would also say, but not in a typical way of 50-question survey questionnaire. I think very quick, low-friction questions that will start to modify over time based on what we're already hearing. Outside of that, there will be a combination of in-person meetings. I think we are thinking through how best to engage with the villages and whether we roll that into the larger public process, or whether, the village boards or you as the CA representative of a village are kind of gathering that information. But as much as we can, we want to create a space that's safe for conversation, and we're not driving an education effort or dictating what we think we hear. That really will come when we formulate a draft document. That is then going to be something to respond to. So I think that probably the biggest thing for me to say is that anywhere that we can go to where people are, and including, online forums where people are, and give them information about how to intersect with this process, that is our method. We are not going to try and recreate the tools. We are going to try to connect to the tools that already exist today. So I think those channels, or if you have, newsletters, or you have smaller forums, but it's everything from Nextdoor to Facebook to, Discord and Reddit, right? So it's lots of different places, and places that, from what Tim and I have discussed, CA has not necessarily had a presence of before. But again, we're not there to tell people what CA is. We're there to listen to what people want. And that's not, we can be all things to all people, but it is really starting to identify where the priorities and values really are, and how can our budget align with that so that our spending aligns with where our residents and property owners and workers want us to be focusing our resources. Tim, on the 22nd, will have a more distinct list of resources, but I think that gives you a flavor of the type of meetings we're talking about. Lastly, for in-person, I think it'll be a combination of small scale and large scale, and we are kind of toying with the tools now of, could we do real-time voting in the room? There's lots of online tools for that, and also even trying to figure out whether in this first budget cycle we could try and do some scenario testing where we would actually, and we're kind of toying with it right now as a tool, make a change in part of the budget and be able to see. That has a lot of assumptions built into it, obviously. So it's a big lift for Susan's team, and I've been very impressed, and a lot of our other operations teams, because the other change you're going to see is the way that we talk about the budget and what kind of the buckets are, as I call them. That's going to look very different when it comes to you, because it needs to be in categories, buckets that people understand, that they can touch and feel and understand in the community. So that revamp in and of itself is, remapping out where GL accounts fit to and all those kind of parts and pieces.
30 seconds.
So that's where I want to keep staff resources as opposed to managing conversation. We're here to listen. That's what's important now.
Thank you. Andy?
I like the schedule as proposed. I think you did a good job. What I would encourage the board members to do is to go back to your village boards, and particularly your village managers, and let them know that, one, the schedule is going to look very different. Number two, they're not going to get a letter saying, we want your input by, because they all expect that. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
and so I expect my village manager will probably ask, when's our input due? So just explain that we
That's
don't
time.
have it. And then the last thing is to let them know that the budget is going to look different. Because once again, a number of them, are used to seeing a certain type of budget with a lot of particular information, and just kind of set the stage to tell them it's going to look different and it's not going to have as much detail. And I think that's really incumbent upon us to tell our villages about that's what's coming.
Yeah, it's a good call out. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
All right, so we're out of time. If anyone has additional comments, we can vote to continue, or we can move on to the next topic. Okay. All right, our next topic is the presentation of information regarding the policies for women, minority, and disabled-owned businesses in CA's purchasing process.
That's 30
Hi,
minutes.
my name is Pat O'Malley, and I'm Director of Purchasing here to talk to you about the Minority Business Enterprise Program. A couple months ago, a couple of board members asked for a status update to see where we are with that particular project and program, and that's why we're here tonight. One important item to consider is that our Minority Business Enterprise Program is scheduled to sunset on April 30th of 2022. So therefore, it's very, we have plenty of time, but it's important for us to start the discussion now to see what the board would want to do, perhaps extending it for some period of time beyond that. Also important to understand is we at CA, we have modeled our MBE program after Howard County Government's program, which is administered by their Equal Business Opportunity Program. So we kind of piggyback off of that and follow their certifications, and which really helps us to be successful in our program, but also to do it with fewer resources. In your packet tonight, you'll see the chart which shows how we've done our grades, if you will, relative to our MBE spend from 2012 through 2021. With certified minority business enterprise firms. I do have a very brief presentation available tonight that I'm going to go walk through just to kind of hit the highlights of what the purchasing office does to support the MBE program and to ensure that we do our very, very best to meet the goals. As you can see in the numbers, we haven't met them, not for lack of trying, but we're working really hard. But we have a ways to go, and we can certainly do better. So what we do in the CA purchasing office to help all our CA team members with purchasing responsibilities, and there's about 100 of them. So there's 100 CA team members out there that, as part of their job, in addition to many, many other tasks that they have, purchases for their particular program. So the purchasing office goes to them and trains them on what the MBE policy is. And we help them and we assist them and we provide them MBE firms for the specific goods and services that they purchase to ensure that they contact these firms and do business with these firms to the maximum extent possible. So the purchasing office is a resource. Just three of us in the purchasing office, so we're kind of small, but we do our best to reach out to everyone. Thank you, Susan, for the next slide. Competitive bids. What we really do well is when we go out for competitive bid, and I don't know, we probably do 60, 70, maybe more a year of formal competitive bids, we automatically send that invitation for bid or that request for proposal to the minority business enterprise firms. And that's a big help. So they don't have to go to our website. Hopefully they check it at the right time to see what's out there. We automatically send it to them so that they can take a look at the specifics of the project and determine whether that's a good fit for them or not. So in our pre-bid meetings at all of these particular projects, we talk to the prime contractors to ensure that they do their very best to get MBE subcontracting opportunities. And then even more than that, we say, okay, we drill down on the job. What's the job? What is this project? So who are you using? Do you need a plumber? Do you need an electrician? Is it straight supply? So maybe you don't have a chance to do much there. But we give them the names of the specific vendors, that could be vendors, either through Howard County or more specifically throughout the state of Maryland, and strongly encourage them to contact those vendors and to get some subcontracting quotes. We're very transparent. So we've had our projects on our CA website for a long time, many years, and the MBE policy objectives are there as well as our bid awards and contracts awards over the last couple of years. So then all vendors can see, specifically, okay, here's what CA buys, and they can take a look and see if that's a match with them or not. And it can always, our information's there, the purchasing office information. They can call us up, just talk it through in greater detail than what you can put out on a on the website. Collaboration with the state and county. So I mentioned Howard County government. Dean Hoff is the purchasing administrator there. I've been talk with him regularly. We used to meet quarterly. Of course, COVID changed that with a round table with Dean, as well as the Howard County Library System, Howard County Public Schools, and Howard Community College. So we would always get together, discuss contracts, share contracts where applicable and where we could, and just discuss what MBE firms are doing really, really well. What other firms might need a little more assistance, to get them up to speed a little bit. The state of Maryland has a really once a year out at the fairgrounds in Timonium, and we go every year to have a table out there with every other county in the state, or at least in this general area, so that all vendors, MBEs and non-MBE prime vendors who can meet with and contact with the MBE vendors, and they get to talk to us, purchasing, specialists for all the respective areas. So at CA or Anne Arundel County or Baltimore County or wherever they may be coming from. So it's a great opportunity for the MBE vendors because they get it all at once. So many years ago, it used to be, you'd have one here in Anne Arundel, then one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast of Maryland. But we get together there. It's a nice big spot, and a little bit more bang for the buck and save some resources. So that's what we do in the purchasing office, to do our best to attain those goals and hopefully do better than the goals. But as you see in the numbers, we haven't quite gotten there. So that's about it. Just want to open it up for questions.
Renee? Yeah, so I guess my first question is, has Howard County met its goals in contracting with minority-owned businesses?
The answer is yes. Howard County has a goal of 20% of total dollars. Currently, their most recent published is 21%, that they attained 21% on a goal of 20%.
And may I ask, or is it in specific areas that those minority businesses are contracting with the county government? In other words, is it areas that we're not utilizing contractors, or maybe we are utilizing contractors?
No, no specific areas. We utilize the same, mostly the same areas that they utilize. Quite honestly, they have the numbers, and they give you the numbers, and their MBE spend is $58 million in that particular year. So that equates to, I don't know, well over 200 and some million dollars of spend. And I don't know, they're a very large organization, so I'm not quite sure how they come about those percentages, quite honestly. So they probably, I would guess, probably take away a lot of spend that they may feel is ME vendors do not have an opportunity to do business in. I'm not quite sure how they do that, because I know they spend a whole lot more than that.
Right, but may I ask another question? Have you attended any minority affinity organizations or professional organizations? Like Minority Engineering Association, Minority Architectural Associations?
No, have not gone to the associations. Where we meet and greet them is at these larger events where they can come and talk to, again, both us, CA, and other
So
counties.
of the 8% or 9% that you currently have, what percentage of those dollars are in the open space contracting, lawn cutting business type things versus the professional services?
I can get you that information. I don't have it at my fingertips.
Thank you.
Tina?
Thank you. Good evening. I wanted to ask, you had said that you had identified roadblocks. What are those roadblocks, and what are the solutions being put in place to overcome them?
Okay, I don't think I mentioned roadblocks. It's just some things that come up in the normal practices of business. So, for example, we've at least two firms that were MBE firms that had done very, very well. They started out, they were entrepreneurs, provided great service. We were very happy with them, and they grew and got bought out by larger firms that are non-MBEs. So then, therefore, they no longer qualify. So that's kind of a good news, bad news type of situation, right? So it's very, very good for the entrepreneur and the owner of the company. But then we lose, we lose that participation because once they're purchased or by another entity, you lose that. So, in many ways, that's a good thing. Roadblocks, I'm not so sure. We have a small staff. Again, there's 3 of us here. We do the outreach we can. But I don't have the staff that Howard County EBO office has. Mahesh Sabnani, he's the EBO coordinator. We meet with him. We try to get as much information as possible, but I guess we do the best with what we have.
Do you have marketing support?
Very little. A little bit of marketing support relative to when we do go to the events. We have a nice table set up and nice bib that's there. And, there's always someone there to take photos and pictures of the entire event. And we're in those. And so that's helpful.
Does the marketing and communications team use the bid notices that are posted on the website and distribute those across our other channels?
No, but what other channels might you be referring to?
The CA Twitter account, the CA Facebook page, the CA regular newsletters. Are those?
No,
is
we
that a
do not do-
possibility? Is there a reason not to do that?
I don't believe so. Sure, we could do that.
Okay, we have Dick, then Lakey, then Ginny.
You say that you send bulletins out to all of these MBE businesses. Do you get responses from them? I mean, are they putting in proposals that we can look at? And is that where we are having a problem?
Yes, we do not get a lot of response. Sometimes it's no response at all, but it's a good question because then we always include in our invitation for bids and RFPs a form as to why didn't you bid? You know, we have certain boxes you can check, or you can just put it in there in the narrative, you know. We don't sell that particular product. This is in our area, whatever the situation may be. We get very few of that back, to be quite honestly. Most firms we just don't hear from. That's not just with the MBEs. We send them to other non-MBEs, and we don't hear from them either. So,
Okay, thank you.
Lakey?
I just wanted to add one clarification, and I think Pat kind of referenced it, but being new to CA, one of the things that surprised me was the way that we're doing our calculation. The only thing we're exempting from our expenditure line is utilities and payments to other government entities. So we're not accepting anything. And most of my experience from the government side of defining MBE and then identifying participation targets and then reporting on them takes actually, and Pat kind of referenced this, you go by sector and you locally decide whether you think people are actually active in that sector. So I just want to point out the calculation for us is off very close to our total spend, whereas the calculation for perhaps other entities, and I'm not speaking about Howard County specifically, but many other governmental entities, they'll reduce it, and it's about close to maybe half or sometimes even a third of their spend that they're running their participation number off of. So the way we run it is exempting only utilities and government entities.
Is that something we're looking at reevaluating?
Well, I think it's why our number is where our number is. So I just want to, I don't think it's a wrong way to do it. I think it's a more accurate picture, but I just wanted to clarify, you know, not everybody's using the same type of calculation. That's just an important piece of information.
Thank you. Jenny?
15 minutes.
Thank you.
That kind of puts us at a disadvantage when somebody just looks at a chart. So we may want to look at that. The 1 point, Patrick, the 1.5 million here, how many vendors are we talking about? I have two quick questions. How many vendors are we talking about?
I have to look it up. I'm going to guess about 40 MBE vendors make up that spend.
Individual vendors, no repeat. Okay, 40 businesses we're dealing with. And you're going to, at some point, tell us where they primarily are receiving grants, like open space, et cetera.
I can absolutely do that. No trouble.
Now, this is going to sound like a strange question, but I was working on something about food trucks coming to our pools, and this happened to be a minority owner of the food truck, somebody that's really great. So are we getting credit for food trucks? I mean, I know they're not doing procurement there, but they are getting approval to be a business and they're earning money. And if they're a minority, isn't there some way we've given them an opportunity to actually have their business earn money from a CA property?
That's not
So
our spend.
understand, Jenny, it's spend. So the food trucks,
Spend.
we charge them $50.
It's the wrong fiscal
You know, so you're going to get $50, but it's not going to affect your spend in those dollars. So here's how I look at it, and here's the reason why I chose to not reduce the total spend as much as others might, because I thought it was more true. I thought it was fair. I thought it was honest. And that's the appropriate way to do it. But also, I would say to the board, take a look at everything we do. Because all these actions that are described tonight are the exact same actions that are taken at the county relative to how can we help an MBE vendor do business with CA. And it doesn't matter if it's $25 or $25,000. That's what it's all about. And the best success story we have is when we start doing business with an MBE vendor of any type and they grow and they get better and they do business with other entities too, not just us. That's what we're all about, and that's what we want to do. So whether the numbers are large or not is somewhat unimportant to me. How we help them grow their business in this community is
Well,
what we want to do.
yeah, now I understand it's spend of, CA money, but I'm just trying to figure a way that we can get credit for getting somebody employment. Okay, I'll drop it.
So, yeah, let me just make a comment about the food truck thing. That's for FY '22, and these numbers go through '21, right? This year, we're in '22 already.
No, I'm just,
Yeah.
what are we thinking about
Yeah,
that,
but-
that category?
right.
Could be others like that where we're dealing with different businesses and, yeah, we're not,
Right.
it's not a
So-
procurement.
Here's my comment. We have to go an extra mile here, okay? The minority communities, not only in Columbia, but throughout this country, congregate differently than I would, okay? I think we're going to have to go an extra mile. We might have to go to barbershops. We might have to go to their religious,
Renee, three
Places
people.
of worship.
3 people work in the office. Let's keep that.
I
in mind.
understand.
Okay.
But we have to make a commitment. We're in a very diverse community, and we have to make a true commitment to do this. I mean, I look at the percentages, we can argue about those all day, good, bad, indifferent, but the dollar amount is just still sitting there at the same place it was in 2012, 9 years later. And I think that we can do better, and I'll just leave it at that.
Tina?
I wanted to ask, in addition to the numbers, the breakdown that Renee asked for, if you could break it down by MBE, WBE, and DBE? as
Certainly.
well?
Yeah,
The
I
firm
have it.
count?
I have it that way. We can do
The
that.
firm count and the spend in both cases, please?
Yes, got it.
How many years back can you go?
To 2012.
Thank you. Uh, 10 minutes.
Pat, can you tell me how we arrived at 12%? Like what?
We were at 10%, I believe, about 5 years ago. Same thing, went to the board with the policy that was renewing at the time, and the board requested 12, so we went to 12.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. That's a good question.
Okay, any other comments or questions regarding? All right, thank you very much, Patrick.
Thanks.
Appreciated the presentation. Okay, so next up we have the village's financials cap.
Okay, so we're not going to walk through the memo, just going to try to hit the highlights. I'm imagining that this was interesting and important to you, so I would imagine that you read that. And here's where we are, just perspective. So we're at a point in time that happens every year, and has happened for as decades beyond my memory or my time here, where the excess cash terms of the management contract are evaluated and applied. So at this point in time, every year, the villages calculate the amount of excess cash according to the management contract, what the amount that would be above established reserve amounts that would be returned to CA. Back in April 2021, the CA board approved a resolution to change the terms of the management contract related to excess cash to provide additional exclusions over and above the 20% threshold that exists. So those exclusions, plus the dissolution of the contingency fund, and I won't get into the details, but that amounts to this $939,000 in total that's in the memo here and that I have up on the screen. So then at about the same time, or I think a little earlier, around the budget vote in February, some village boards asked that the CA board waive the entire excess cash calculation for this fiscal year.
Right.
So in addition to the expanded exclusions, they asked that for that waiver. So that's the focus of this discussion. So that's what's before for you to discuss tonight and then ultimately vote on in 2 weeks, hopefully. So let's see, I'll try and see this visually. So this graph shows the relative, the amounts of cash reserves and the cash that the villages have as of April 30, 2021. This is the data that we received from the village managers. In some cases, it's estimates because some are still working through their year-end closeout processes. But so it's possible that it could change. And the representation here shows that the bottom, the dark blue, is what is the normal cash reserves amount. So let me bring that up to my page. Sorry, let me just get lots of papers here.
So, can I ask a question? What do you mean by normal cash reserves?
So what I meant by is what the management agreement says. Before,
Based on your formula?
based on the management contract.
The 20%.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 20%. Right. Now, this already reflects something that we're proposing from the staff's perspective, a 3-year average instead of just the 1 year of the, usually it's the most recent year, but we're proposing, looking at 3 years, that actually is more favorable because thinking that the FY21 wasn't, a normal period. Right. And that's in here. So the light blue is all of the potential exclusions to date. So this reflects the items on the previous page, like the, back to my other page. The FY20, the additional annual charge share, any unspent CARES grants and loans are taken out of here, the retained excess from FY17 for certain villages, and the contingency fund. So this is all of the exclusions to date. So factoring in those exclusions to date and the 3-year average, it ends up that the green is the amount of excess cash that would be returned under this updated formula, and it's for 3 villages. So you can barely see, you really can't see the number for King's Contrivance, but there's a little bit of green there. So that total for the 3 villages is $94,000.
I'm sorry. The $94,000 is for all 3 together?
Right.
Okay, the cumulative total.
Sorry?
That's okay, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, and that's for Hickory Ridge, it's $70,000. King's Contrivance, it's $1,500. And for Oakland Mills, it's $23,000.
Is that with the waiver or without?
So the waiver would be 0.
Okay.
So, right. So this is with all of the exclusions and the 3-year average.
Thank you.
So if the blue part, if the 20% was based on expenses just for FY21, there would actually be 6 villages that would have excess cash under the formula, and the total would be $185,000. So this is definitely a more favorable treatment.
What would those additional villages be?
I have that if you need it,
Thanks,
Susan.
Jackie. Yep.
It would be, in addition, let's see, Hickory Ridge instead of 70,000 would be 87,000. King's Contrivance instead of 1,500 would be 16,000. Oakland Mills instead of 23,000 would be 52,000. River Hill instead of nothing would be 14,000. Town Center instead of no excess cash would be 13,000. And Wild Lake instead of nothing would be 1,000.
Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome.
Did you have a question?
No.
Okay.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you haven't gotten here yet, but I'm just trying to reconcile this chart with the attachment that has the cash reserves in addition to. So am I understanding correctly that the green is the part that comes back or is reinvested in that village?
It would be, yes.
Okay, that was what I was confused on. Thank you.
Right.
One other question.
Yes.
Has this been shared with the villages, this information?
Yes.
So they're totally aware of all?
They are aware of
The
it,
village managers or the village boards?
with the village managers.
I was gonna say, in our case, it was both.
With both, because it hasn't been shared with our board.
That would be up to the manager.
Okay.
When did that happen, Susan?
It wasn't that long ago, within the last 10 days. or
Okay.
so.
We haven't had a meeting.
Okay, so this chart that's on the next page just sums it up, shows that what the cash and investments are for each of the fiscal years. And you can see that for FY 2019, on the far right, that was a normal year of operations, right? No COVID shut, right? For whatever normal is, but no, let's say a non-pandemic year. And the total balance is $2,934,000, and you can see the spread among the villages. So FY20, obviously 6 weeks of shutdown, so it wasn't a full fiscal year, and the cash balances at the end of that year are $3,215,000. So FY21, the year that's just ended, and we know just how constricted that was for the village operations, the balances are $3,314,000. So. So, and I think that's important to note that there's a good amount of cash. There's a significant increase over what was a non-pandemic year where full operations, full needs. And so there's appears to be a significant amount of cash and certainly an increase. I just would ask that you consider the staff recommendation, which you have here in the narrative, that first of all, we would recommend that we use a 3-year average to accommodate or just to acknowledge the unexpected nature of the years that we've all had. Just remember that these are community-wide resources, that some are paid by people, property owners who aren't even in a village and aren't reflected in here in some cases. And that it's really your decision. You know, it's the CA board's decision how those resources are spent. So, oh, and I had one other chart that wasn't in the package. You know, when we worked on the cash reserves for CA, the emergency cash reserves, we talked about.
Thank you. Thank you.
What's a normal or a benchmark or best practice kind of percentage? And some entities used, some organizations recommended 20% of expenses, some 25, and so we just wanted to show here where the villages would be. So their percentages, uncommitted cash at the top, that's the cash after taking out all the bills in the pipeline, accounts payable, or security deposits, their reserve for audits, the periodic audits, and those would still be at the lowest, 26% and to a high of 58%, an average of 34%. Gross cash, you know, everything that's there, that's on the balance sheet, is quite significant. And CA's initial cash reserves, the $2 million, is 4% of that, of the similar number. So just context. Yes.
Could you share that with us, email us that new?
Sure.
Thank you.
And so that's Jackie, what would you add as you've worked on?
I guess one thing I wanted to say was that in response to the question about communication with the villages, Susan and I did meet with the village managers at 2 of their meetings to discuss this with them. We talked about a number of things. We talked about just the shared responsibilities that all of us have related to where the funds should reside and need to reside. The some of the village managers discussed the challenges that they're facing with reopening and evolving into this next normal. Susan shared with them the challenges and the exposure that CA has, especially with a net asset base of $135 million. And then we talked a little bit about other areas of support that CA provides outside of the annual charge share, such as we provided them with a breakdown by village of CA's support of all of the village benefits, repairs and maintenance, and taxes and insurance on the buildings. You know, just trying to look at any traction or appetite in you know, sharing with that potentially some of those expenses. And then, you know, as Susan mentioned, we discussed that the FY21 expenses that the villages have experienced are not reflective of a typical year with respect to this calculation. So with that, we then took a really hard look at the data again through asking for estimates from all of the village managers who, as of their year-end numbers, and came up with the recommendation, and then followed up in an email to all of the villages to say, hey, you know, basically there is no village manager meeting before the board meeting to share what we're going to recommend. So it was summarized nicely by Kristen in an email to all of them. And we offered to meet if they had any concerns. Heard back from 2 village managers, one saying, you know, thank you for the information, and the other one saying that it seemed like a good approach. So, the other thing that I guess I just wanted to kind of say in closing and kind of big picture is that it is perfectly acceptable and expected that nonprofit organizations would have cash reserves. But with that, the amount needs to be reasonable and in line with the risks and the exposure that an organization has. In a lot of cases, that justification is demonstrated in a cash reserves policy. With the villages, in lieu of a formal policy for many years, 20% of uncommitted cash has been that threshold. And it's really proven to be sufficient, more than sufficient, because, you know, that was evidenced by the contingency fund that ended up being dissolved since it was largely unused. But now, you know, fast forward to the pandemic, and we're looking at the resources needed by the villages to reopen their doors and go into their, you know, new normal. So with that, there have been additional layers, as evidenced in that chart Susan shared, to allow for a higher cap. And then at the end of the day, even with using an average of the 3 years of expenses, which again, Susan explained is favorable for the villages, there are still 3 villages with excess cash, which we're recommending is repaid to CA and then invested in those respective villages. You know, I guess my final comment is just that all 11 of our organizations, the villages and CA, have collective responsibility as fiduciaries of this annual charge share. And that was at the forefront of our minds and continues to be when we were analyzing the financials and developing these recommendations.
Renee and then Dick.
Let somebody else go first.
Dick?
Jackie, I really appreciate the way you and Susan are working with the villages. And I've heard good things about that. And but I'm just wondering if in all these meetings that you have with them, are there any real items of contention or issues that need to be resolved? Are there things that we need to look at, or do you think things are cruising along pretty well?
Are you asking with respect to their financials and just kind of financial sustainability, or?
I'm trying to get a feel for the, let's just say the cordiality level, and to see if there are any issues that keep coming back and that need some attention. Or do you think things are kind of at a happy, you know, they're hidden issues, or are there elephants in the room, or whatever we want to call them, that are getting in the way of a smooth function here?
Well, it's hard to say because I don't feel that every village manager is equally speaking up. You know, some speak a lot, some are very transparent in where they are, and some are quiet. So I just don't think there's a general sense there. I do think that there's one elephant in the room, and that is, and I brought it up at one of the village managers meetings, that, you know, this excess cash that there can tend to be a use or lose mentality, right? Well, we should spend it or we're going to be giving it back. And just my hope is that we shift that to, if it comes back, it's then being invested, you know, into the community, and we're all, you know, every village is benefiting from that. So I guess that's what I would consider as the one elephant. And it's probably something that should be taken into consideration when the next kind of iteration of the management contract starts to be discussed.
Susan, anything?
I think that this conversation, or these times that we met, was focused really on this issue and getting to hopefully a mutually agreeable place that we could recommend something to the board that would, you know, be satisfactory. But I think one of the things that, at least, and I agree with Jackie, I certainly don't hear from all 10, period, much less equally. So it's hard to make a sweeping statement. But what I do hear from a couple is that they feel like they would like to be more able to self-determine. And that, I understand that.
Okay, thank you.
Jess?
Hi. So I'm sorry, I have a few questions, and so just cut me off if I ask too many. But one is, could you refresh us on what in general the villages were asking for? And I ask that because I know that Hickory Ridge did not request to keep everything. They requested a permanent change to the cap to 40%, as I recall. Was overall of the 10 villages, what was sort of the general consensus, or was there not one as to what they really wanted?
Well, we didn't hear from all 10 did not submit requests to the board, to the CA board.
Okay.
To have the cash reserves the excess cash calculation waived. I think there were 4 or 5 that did, and
okay.
My understanding was that I didn't go back and look. I'd have to go back and look, but it was not everyone that
Sure.
we heard from, and I don't remember the specific. Did you know?
Okay. So could like I said, I know Hickory Ridge had requested just that the cap be permanently increased to 40% from 20%. I would encourage the board to consider that as an option, because can you go back to that chart that had the percentages, that Excel spreadsheet that you had up? So as you can see, right, most people are somewhere between 20 and 40. So if the cap were changed permanently to 40%, some people would still give money back, but others who are in between that 20 to 40% would be able to keep that money. So that's just sort of a comment on that. And then one other question, the cash reserves policy that we approved for CA, as I recall, 4% was not the ultimate goal. It was intended to be higher. Can you refresh me on what that percentage was?
I would have to look. I think it was maybe 12. I'll look that up.
That's sort of what seems to stick in my head, was 12, but I wasn't sure. And then my last question is, I love the idea. I know villages have requested that if they do have to return excess cash, that it would go back into projects within that village. And I would encourage that, either way, whether the board votes to, continue to let the villages who would retain money keep it, or to continue to keep the cap where it is, whatever, that we could consider that clause going forward, because I believe it creates an incentive for villages to perform well and to, not overspend at that end of the year piece, with the thought that then that money could go back into their village. And Jackie, I saw you. My last question is that with that clause in place, you said there'd be a focus on environmental projects. I'm sure you're aware that a lot of folks in Hickory Ridge are very concerned about a particular tot lot that needs to be replaced. Is that the kind of project that could be considered for those excess funds if they were returned?
Okay, Jackie's up, and then Lakey.
I just wanted to clarify one thing that you said, Jess. If you look at this row and, to your point about increasing to 40%, the only way that anyone over 40% would pay anything back is if there were none of those additional exclusions, because remember, everything that the board has approved thus far is layered on top of it. So there would be no excess cash. And so, that has to be looked at as like a different analysis to say, you get what I'm saying.
Right. I do get what you're saying, because you've already excluded like PPP and a few other things. No, that's a fair point. So they're already keeping more than 20% because of those exclusions.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay.
Much better said, well said. I think that as far as the reinvestment in the villages, that those details would be to be determined, and maybe somebody else can speak to that. But the other last comment that I just wanted to say is that we really all, well, not we, you guys, everyone on all of the boards owe it to the community to say if anything beyond this recommendation is going to be kept, that we can justify the need for that, where that cash resides. So it's a reminder.
Lakey, Renee, and then Jenny.
I wanted to specifically address the staff recommendation of the reinvestment in the village. So we had an interdepartmental meeting to discuss kind of the staff recommendation and how to approach this. And I do want to very clearly state that we settled on environmental improvement projects because that has a Columbia-wide impact for those dollars. We actually very specifically talked about an investment in, for example, a tot lot could very quickly result in inequity across villages. And we do not want to incent that kind of behavior. Right. So environmental improvement, it is a ecosystem that everybody across Columbia would, a rain garden here still helps another village across Columbia. And again, bioswales, whatever it might be. So we feel pretty strongly that that is a very specific recommendation. And then I wanted to make a general comment as someone coming into this process that there is a management agreement in place that is a 5-year term, and exceptions were made, obviously, during a pandemic time. So there, as a proportionate amount, there is not a significant amount that actually is considered excess this fiscal year because of the increased number of exceptions. So the villages, in terms of a cash position and the cash reserves, and that's kind of what that chart was meant to demonstrate, are in a significantly better cash reserve position than CA as a whole. So I just want to make sure that is coming across among all the charts and all the numbers and all the tables. Again, it's not a significant amount given the exceptions CA as an organization is nowhere near the ratio of cash reserves that the villages, each and every one have. And we're willing to take that excess cash and make sure it's going into projects that frankly we had to cut out of our budget as CA, but still would result in a community benefit.
Thank you. I'll just remind everyone we're
Gotcha,
down
thank
to
you.
our last few minutes.
3
So,
minutes.
Renee and then Ginny.
Okay, so I have two points. One is, did anyone look at the projected cash uses for FY '22? So I know that our village is going to show a pretty substantial loss. I mean, we're not going to give anything back anyways, but I'm looking across the board and wondering, of the 10 villages, are we the only village that's going to use quite a bit of money to ramp up, to lease up the assets that we have under our management contract? And how does this fit into that?
So I'm unaware of any village having done their
Projections?
Their projections, but they have budgets, right?
Right,
So
budgets.
I can't speak to them. Have you seen the budgets, Jackie, and had a chance to look at those?
No. So they've been coming in late. I don't know if it's timing of village board meetings or just delays in preparation, but they have not come to my desk yet.
Okay, I just think that there needs to be some consideration for the ramp-up phase of what was a considerable downturn in business by the villages over the next few months, because it is going to take some time to lease up these assets. My other comment is about the legality of all this. I know we say the villages are separate, we have a separate management contract, but when we start stating what an adequate amount of cash is on the balance sheet of a village, I think we've reached in as part of management. And I'd like to have a legal opinion as to whether or not the villages maintain third-party status doing that.
So the management contract was a mutually agreed upon.
It doesn't matter.
Contract?
There's no consideration in the management contract.
I'm not following.
Consideration, in other words, if you do this, I'll pay you that, a percentage, a dollar amount, et cetera. So the management contract is no
Well, it's like a
consideration.
grant agreement, right?
That's right. So my question is, are they truly third party if we're reaching in to determine the cash balance on their balance sheet? Or have they become part of CA?
Okay.
Thank you. Ginny, last one.
Yeah, my understanding then is the 3-year average is only applying this time. We're going back to what the management contract says for, 1 year after that. What's left of the management contract years?
Right.
Okay.
At this point, right.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, that's what the contract says, yeah. I totally agree with what Lakey was saying about we should not consider 40%. The management contract is a management contract. We will have somebody will have an opportunity to look at a new management contract through negotiations. I'd like to better understand, and not tonight, but all the benefits that CA is giving in terms of includes employee benefits, that amount to another couple of $1 million a year. What
That's
are,
time.
Sort of a list, if it's not too much work, and what exactly that costs. The employees are village board employees. They're hired by the village board, fired, trained, whatever. So why are we paying benefits? Now, I know there are some things where maybe healthcare, it's easier to help the villages learn what contracts or what companies you go with in healthcare. But the benefits, I just want to understand that better. As if we're going to look at reducing the cash reserves or,
So
Okay.
I think we have a summary of those. that we
Okay.
can-
And the amount that it's actually costing and why we're doing that, I guess, is, and there's
Okay,
a couple
we're-
other things.
we're out of
Thank
time,
you.
Ginny.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we are moving on to, thank you, Susan and Jackie. I appreciate your thoughtful proposal and the work that went into that.
You're welcome.
Moving on to the proposed President and CEO rating scale process and goals. I just want to call out here before we start this discussion that the expectation here is there are two pieces of this. There's the deciding on the scale and goals, and then there's deciding on the evaluation calculation. The goals and The evaluation scale will be discussed in open meeting. The discussion of the calculation of how this will be determined will be handled in a closed meeting. So I just wanted to make that clear. So we will not be diving into anything about how it's going to be calculated. Tonight, we're focusing on the goals themselves, the scale, the schedule, and whether or not you feel like this is what the board wants. So this is based primarily on what Monica had shared with us. Based on the board feedback, I changed the scale from 1 to 5 to 0 to 4. In the end, it doesn't matter, right? So, I mean, I think, but if that makes people feel better, great.
Yes, thank you for doing it.
Yeah. So I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but the 6 categories, or 7 categories actually. So 5 were ones that Monica had already proposed. One of those overlapped with the goals that Lakey had laid out for herself. And then 2 were based on both Lakey's goals and what we determined to be our priorities. And that was the community engagement and the strategic partnerships. So just a quick run through on the schedule. We want to have the evaluation finalized by the end of this month. I think that's only fair to understand, how things will be calculated moving forward. So mid-year, so the first 2 weeks of November, the board will be expected to complete an evaluation for a mid-year review. Obviously, there's no financial incentive attached to that. This serves a couple of purposes. 1, to make sure that our process is going to work as smoothly as I hope it will. And 2, so that Lakey has that feedback mid-year, and there's if there's any opportunity for course correction or, encouragement to continue doing exactly what she's doing, then she has that. And then the expectation would be that by the end of November, those results will be shared. Following that period of time, we will have a period of feedback solicited from what the process was, whether it went smoothly or didn't go smoothly, and hopefully iron out any of those things prior to the final review at the end of the year. And then so that, in assuming this policy goes forward, the expectation would be the sitting board should always be the one evaluating a president and CEO. It makes no sense for new board members who have not been working with the president and CEO to complete that evaluation, and therefore we would want to make sure that everything is completed before the end of April so that there's opportunity for a little bit of buffer. All right. Okay, so that said, yeah, Andy.
Just a couple of comments. One, I want to thank you, Jenna, and I think you put together a pretty good package. So under the financial leadership stewardship item, the third one talks about engaging the board in a robust dialogue about financial reports and plans, providing information, things like that. So when I read that, I was thinking, the board almost never has discussed the financial reports because it's all done at the audit committee, and so I am not sure whether, because it says the board and not the audit, at the board level, do we now intend that the board is going to get into an active discussion over financial reports, or if we do it in the audit committee, is that good enough to meet so that everybody understands? Because otherwise, somebody might read this and say, oh, we never talked about it at the board. Well, we talked about it at the audit committee. So I just wanted to.
Absolutely, that's a very fair point.
Yeah, just want to bring that up. And then under community engagement, the last goal talks about conducting in all 10 villages, citizens education. So my concern when I read that was, do we have to go to does that mean we have to go to every village individually? I mean, because I thought we had kind of a neat idea where we're pairing villages and, maybe we'll do 3 or 4 together or something. Yeah, and so I just wanted to make that clarification. So once again, somebody doesn't read that and said, well, you didn't go to every village.
Yeah.
But no, we can pair as long as we get, that I just, okay. And my other 2 comments were, maybe if we want to cut down the number of categories, you look at, combining community engagement and strategic partnership and leadership, culture, and ethics. I mean, it's just a thought. It would cut us down then to 5. And then the reason I put it is community engagement and strategic partnerships, to me, kind of looked a little bit similar, and maybe we could just merge those together. And then leadership and culture, I don't know, ethics kind of goes under leadership to me, but that's just the thought. So but other than that, thank you, Janet. I appreciate all the work you did.
Thank you, Andy, for your feedback. Renee?
Yeah, my only comment is that just having under leadership and culture one sentence about sets the tone for DEI, to me, is not sufficient at this level. I think that we need to set some other benchmarks, both internally and for what we expect to do externally to bring other parties to the table. And I don't know that this evaluation as it's written fulfills that goal.
And do you feel that that's exclusively the role of the president and CEO, or?
I think, well, she sets the tone. And I mean, I hate to say it's going to fall on her lap, but it falls on her lap.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm clear on what you're suggesting. So you're suggesting additional bullet points that further elaborate on what that means?
I mean, we just sat here and talked about our minority business practices, and we've fallen short. Now, that's no reflection on Lakey. She hasn't been here for 12 years. But I think that we have to be a little more specific about what our expectations are over a 1-year, well, this is a 1-year review, both internally as far as what we're going to do in our hiring practices and procurement practices, what we're going to do externally to bring more people to the table, whether they're, no matter what their minority status is. And I just think one sentence sets the wrong tone for that.
Okay. So would you be willing to draft some suggestions for what you think should be added?
Do it with me, Tina?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. I'm down, Dick, and then you. So I just wanted to comment, Andy, on yours about combining. I think the ethics and leadership and culture could go together. In my opinion, the strategic partnerships and the community engagement are very separate. And so, I mean, I provide a counterpoint to that because I think community engagement is sort of residents, lien payers, renters, and then strategic partnerships are more organizational level, and that's the way I was looking at that. So, but I am certainly open to combining categories. I'm just curious, though, like, is the concern over 7 categories that it's too much evaluation, that people aren't going to invest enough time, or is that, I mean, is that where?
I've been
Yeah.
there, done that, and it's like.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I trust your
Possibly,
experience, so.
What I found over the years that the more people have to evaluate and write, the less participation. And the other thing that happens is they start out good,
Yeah, gotcha.
and then by the time they get to page 7, 8, 9, 10, they're not so good. So it's just something to consider because it does happen.
Yeah, and so, and I will say this too, I do encourage everyone on the board to review the bullet points specifically, because to your point, Andy, it is important that they reflect what it is we're trying to get at.
Right.
I kind of stole those from some of Monica's things and from Lakey's own goals. So I think in the interest of being very clear and fair, that it's very worthwhile to target those specifics. And so I encourage everybody to take a second look at those and provide feedback on the individual bullets so that we make sure that we're hitting what we think we're hitting. Dick?
I thought this was terrific, and I want to thank you, Janet, for putting it together. I think this shows the value of having a single author who gathers all the information together and puts it together, as opposed to having a committee write something like this. I went through it nitpicking like crazy and couldn't find anything. And,
Well, you can thank Monica for that. I'm not going to pretend it was all me.
Which really surprised me.
Yeah, it surprises me too, to be honest, but.
No, you really did a great job here. And I think Andy brought up some good points. I wish I'd thought of them, but.
See, you could have picked some
5 minutes.
But anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that, again, with a single focal point here, you could kind of coalesce what we've discussed and also get in Tina and Renee's comments. We'll have something. And I really like the pace we got on this.
All right, any other questions or comments? Jess, I see yours about keeping the community engagement and strategic partnerships separate. Any additional feedback?
No, that was it. I do agree that that should be separate.
Okay, thank you.
For the same reasons you stated.
Yeah, thanks. And Dick, to your point about the single point, I think that is a good starting point. I mean, I think the subcommittees have their place in terms of.
Oh, yeah.
That's a little bit of a tangent, but, so I just wanted to say that I think what we will try to do is have a closed meeting after our next session next week. So you may recall that we have meetings every Thursday for the rest of the month. And so we have ample opportunity to have our closed meeting, but I'd like to get that sorted out sooner than later. So please expect to see a closed meeting scheduled for next Thursday.
Yeah, what I meant by that is that have that first draft
Yeah.
prepared by somebody who's gathered all the information, and then we can pick at it. But that's a great way to start. Makes things a lot easier.
Okay. So moving on to capital projects and open space update. Dennis, you're up.
Okay, if I could start with the Fairmead Lane tot lot, and we did a minor capital refreshment there. We spent about $30,000. What's interesting and people don't probably know is that we refresh the mulch every year, but maybe every 3 to 10 years, we have to dig out the tot lot, take it down 10 to 12 inches and take all the mulch out and replace it. The mulch gets contaminated with organic matter and it loses or it becomes a compaction problem for tot lot standard. And so that's something we do every 3 to 10 years, pretty much at every tot lot throughout Columbia. So we're working on bridges. The crews are out and we're taking advantage of schools being closed, Red Branch Road. I stopped by there and met with the crew when they were working on this bridge. And what strikes me every time I meet with them is the amount of pride that goes into the work that they do. And it's a lot of setup to get to where they're going. They're careful. They put mats down to protect the pathway and the grass on the side. But it's just something that when I go out there, I'm always impressed with the work that they do. We did a minor lobby upgrade at the art center, before and after pictures. We covered the irrigation boxes at the tennis courts. And what's important about this to me is 95% of any project can be great, but what people oftentimes see is the last 5%. And I think that sometimes gets overlooked, and I don't want to let that happen on CA projects. That last 5% is important, small piece of the project, but important to the overall aesthetic. We pick up a lot of trash, and we're taking a new look at how we pick that up. Another small project, trash enclosure at the other barn. The crews take a great deal of pride in the 4th of July. And normally, the 4th of July for us starts on June 1. That was not the case this year, and it was a little bit last minute, but they still took a lot of pride in it. And what's interesting to me this year more than any other year, it struck me that we always have a presence at the lakefront, but that presence isn't always as well known as I think it should be. And this year, I think it was very well known, and I look forward to that going, I look for that to happen going forward in future 4th of July events. So bamboo removal, I stopped by 3 sites, Harper's Choice, Wild Lake, and also Owen Brown. And what's interesting about this is the amount of work that goes in. So this is a forestry mulcher. It's about a $40,000 mulcher on the front of this like Bobcat type machine. And that's only the start. So once you mulch it down, you have to haul away often. It's hard to get to some of the spots where this is located. In some cases, we have adjacent residents who don't want the bamboo to be removed. And so and the trouble with bamboo more than any other invasive species is it's completely exclusionary. And you can't see it here, but I walked the site after this was done, and it starves off the trees that are in that area. It takes over the entire area, and it's it's one of those opportunistic plants. And we're putting together a long-term management plan for invasive species this fall, but it's going to be a lot of work. I visited the site in Wild Lake, and what we did there, we took out about 6 or 8 inches of soil, we replanted it, we put sod down, we watered it, then we had to make sure that we fertilize it, and we nurtured that because there's no better surface than thick turf to exclude bamboo. But with that being said, in that specific site, some of the residents didn't want their bamboo to be removed, and it is starting to creep back into the open space where it was removed. So there's more work to come on this, and I thought that it seems like everything is more complicated than you think it would be, and this is really much more complicated than you might think it would be. So the Weed Warriors did an event at Jackson Pond, another one in Wild Lake. We installed some LED lighting, and this cut back the energy usage by 50%, one of Jeremy's jobs. And we installed some new HVAC units at Columbia Gym and Fairway Hills. And right now, we're looking at moving away from natural gas wherever we can. These are called package units, and they sit on the roof. And they make some of these now that are combination heat pumps and gas furnaces. And we're trying to start moving away from natural gas, and the heat pumps are a first step in that direction. So if I could, one of the things that there is that we want to have some fun in open space, and this was a little bit of fun that we had with cicadas.
I'm John McCoy. I'm Columbia Association's watershed manager, and this is the last of our cicada talks. We've been watching them. All the birds are full. All the geese have been out there eating them. Everybody's full, and there's still millions of them flying around. So we thought we would contribute to reducing their numbers.
So today for our Cicada Luncheon, we have some plain cicadas on habanero jelly on crackers. We have some chocolate covered, and we have some cicada banana bread. In anticipation for this event, I went cicada hunting. So the ideal cicadas are the white ones, the freshly emerged ones. However, I had trouble finding those, so we're eating the good, crunchy, hard black ones today. And you can find the banana bread recipe, the chocolate-covered recipe, and more in a University of Maryland Cicadalicious cookbook.
How is that not creating a hostile work environment? You mean to eat bugs?
Where were you, Mikey?
Unfortunately, I was not invited.
Wings are chewy.
3 minutes.
It's like dry raisins.
Oh,
Tastes like chicken.
chicken.
It tastes like nuts a little bit.
That's gross.
Yeah, walnuts. So the only thing about eating cicadas, if you have a seafood allergy, you should not do that. Somewhere back in there, they're related to, not shellfish, but shrimp or something like that.
That was great.
Dennis, did you taste them? Oh, you're muted still. Dennis, you're still muted.
He doesn't want to answer you on that one.
So I told her I couldn't make that tasting, but to call me in 17 years and I'll
There
be
you
there. Any questions?
So I don't have a question. I just want to thank you and your staff. They were very kind to drive us around in the parade. They were a lot of fun. We had a really good time, and I can't say enough good things. So thank you for everything they did.
Dick, and then did you have one too, Jenny? or just-
Yes, I really appreciate the fact you got in those parades. Anything we can do to get out in public and show the flag is good PR, and I like the fact that your people are interested in doing that. On the bamboo, what do you do with it? Is there any value to it, or you just mulch it?
You give it to John McCoy.
Right now, we're just mulching it.
Okay, thank
We
you.
have a topsoil pile, but we're reluctant to put that in the topsoil pile.
Yeah, because it grows like crazy.
So
Yeah.
can I ask one serious question? So Andy and I have been talking about Scotts Pond over close to River Hill. Is it possible that our watershed people could come out and walk that site with us to take a look at what is being proposed? Because it's going to drain into our open space, to get their opinion on it? Or is that out of bounds?
I think that's a great idea. As I was sitting and listening to the meeting, I thought about the walk in Symphony Woods.
Right.
And I think that's a great idea, and set it up for any board member who's interested on the village board or on the CA board.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll set it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, if we're going to do that, there's one row of houses in a separate HOA. It's about a dozen houses. And if it would be all right with you, I'd like to also invite them, even though they're not on the CA board. I mean, they're impacted before they get to our houses by, a couple hundred feet.
Okay, I'll make it happen.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
Ginny?
Yeah. Dennis, I want to thank you and your staff, Danica, Lakey, I'm trying to think who else, Tim, that were involved, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, on the July 4th first bike corral that you guys did. Outstanding. It was the first time. They only threw it together in 2 weeks. They got 50 bikes, a stroller, and some other thing. But that's because people were just learning about it. So that was great. And if we can make it a yearly thing, and you get a thing from CA that says, I rode my bike, and you get tickets that showed CA. So CA got publicity from it. You guys were phenomenal. I know it was a lot of work for you, but thank you so much. Great job.
That's
Thank you.
nice. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dennis, as always. I love the cicadas.
Wait until next time. I've got a lake video in prep right now. I don't want to give too much away, but you're going to love it.
Awesome.
And bring the food the next time.
Okay, so we are moving on to the questions only section. I have a few comments that I just wanted to share there based on previous action items that from other meetings, and these are aligned with our strategic, or with our board priorities. So one, I just wanted to let you know that I've been putting together, we've had these discussions around subcommittees, so I have put together a list, not a list, like a draft of what, the start of a document that I'd like the board to agree on what subcommittees are or aren't, just so that we're all on the same page. I think the main focus here is the transparency for our residents. We want to make sure that when we're creating these committees and reporting back, that information is always made public. And so we just want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is thoughtful and, and providing that sort of input so that this information, et cetera, can go into our board materials. So again, it's a proposal, so I welcome your feedback, and I should be able to send that out maybe this weekend or early next week. So if you could take a look at that. And then based on what we determined our board priorities to be, so I took a stab at creating a roadmap for us. It's a very rough draft, obviously. I think what I foresee us doing is establishing the short-term action items, and then each month we are going to have to discuss what the next short-term action items are. So the ones that floated to the top based on that, and they are on the first page of that roadmap, one is approving the president and CEO goals. So obviously, we're on track for that, and the expectation is to complete that by the end of the month. The second one was to create a subcommittee for Symphony Woods. So Renee and Dick have already started a document, and I think have gotten some input from Ginny. So there will be a starting point for that. I think we'll have to figure out. Yeah, I guess as part of the whole subcommittee thing, do we want to do that in a meeting, or is it okay to do it via email? I'm not sure what the answer to that question is, so we can discuss that. Voting on the Newtown positioning paper, which obviously we did, so yay us. And finally, the preliminary conversations on how to determine what kind of target channels we'd like to target for outreach. So one of our things was engaging new people. We talked about that as one of our board priorities. And so one of the items that came out of that was identifying some new channels. So I put an arbitrary number of 3 on it. We can start there. Certainly we can identify more than that. But so I think what I'd like to do is put that on a future agenda where we can just have sort of an open conversation about it, a little bit of a brainstorming for the board so that we can identify things that we would like. Obviously, we heard a lot from Lakey tonight about some of the tools they're already planning on using. And so I think some other ideas came out, like affinity groups, that type of thing. So, there are a lot of possibilities. And then, we just have to keep in mind that we have 10 months to do them. So we want to keep it at least focused. And if we end up completing things early and want to do more, then, we can certainly do that. So, okay, so that was all I had. So that's it. Does anybody have any additional questions on any of the things under Section 6? Lakey and then Renee?
I had a few remarks for President's remarks. We actually talked about several items earlier, but I did want to just briefly update that, as was already referenced, we put a new card in the mailer that went to all lien holders with information about how to join a conversation, and really attempted to position it as an invitation. I wanted to quickly say, in my short time here, as I have talked both internally and externally, I have heard a real need to listen from the community members I have talked to, that they don't feel like CA has listened. And that's not a blanket statement, but it is a recurring statement. I would also say that they feel kind of disconnected in a variety of different ways. So that was really the origin of, first off, with the annual charge. We are literally touching every lien holder that, is in Columbia and has a direct interest in CA, and we want to make sure they feel not only invited, but in a meaningful way to engage, a consistent way, and a portal to do so. So we are working to create that space. At 4th of July, we started a handout that we are going to continue to do over the summer as more people are out and about, target where people are, like the pools and at events. So one of the key pieces, and as I said earlier, Tim is going to be presenting on July 22nd, is going to have lots of details there. I wanted to take a few minutes tonight, since that is still a couple weeks out, we got in today our next step, which is directly interacting with you as board members. We have produced business-sized cards that have the QR scan code or the website. So everywhere you go, you can hand this to people and say, this is how you get engaged. We want to hear your voice. You are invited. We want you to be a part of it. Again, we are not going to be using this forum to, hey, CA's doing this and you should know this about CA. It really is about listening. We are going to monitor it to keep it a safe and respectful place. But outside of that, we really want to see what organically comes up. And as I mentioned previously, when you do real community work around connection, it's a co-creation. And so we cannot tell you exactly what is going to rise up, and we cannot tell you exactly what our strategy is going to be to address it. And I have a sense that that's a little bit different for CA. So everybody just has to feel comfortable that the closer that we connect and the better we are in proximity to who we are serving as an organization, we will absolutely be better for it. Our strategy will be more relevant, and our programs and services will be of more direct impact, which I think at the end of the day is what we all want. So Tim has brought those in, so we're going to give those to you tonight. And again, he's going to have a lot more detailed information when he speaks, but we're kind of organically rolling this out. You're a big piece of that, so please let everyone know everywhere you go and carry a stack of these cards with you and let everybody know and invite them to the conversation. Thank you.
Renee?
Nothing.
Lakey, a question on that. Do we have any options for non-technical people, like that might not use a computer?
We will. Okay. We don't yet, but we will. There will be opportunities, including in person, and we're kind of toying with actually when we were on site at events, and again, we're doing a big street team piece. There'll be some interaction. We have things like putting ping pong balls in bowls to tell us what you're most interested in. We have an opportunity to put pins and mats. Again, lots of things that Tim will kind of go through. So, yes.
Thanks. Dick?
And don't forget, Nina has that first Thursday thing at 70 Woods, and we've been offered a card table there or whatever.
Yes. Yep, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for anything in that section? Okay. All right, do we have any proposed new topics?
Can I ask a general question? Renee had good questions about the MBE program. When is our normal process for the answers would come back?
Yeah, so we have a tracking form. So usually when things like that pop up, so there's two tracking forms, one for residents, one for board members. And when the board members propose things like that, it generally will go on the tracking form. If it's going to take longer, then, I mean, usually it's a couple of weeks, but it depends on the type of information that needs to be gathered. So
then it'll be back on an agenda?
Generally, it comes out via email or,
okay.
But,
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Andy.
Not a question, but I just kind of wanted to remind everyone that next Thursday we're meeting for advisory committees. And please remember that Janet Logren sent out the link to all the reports. I would encourage all the board members to please read those advisory committee annual reports before the meeting.
And I second that. Thank you.
Can I add to that? Have the advisory committees been advised what the format is, how much time they have, what the board would be grateful if they did, et cetera?
Yes.
So that there's some uniform approach, and otherwise we're going to have somebody reading a 10-page report.
Nope, we're not.
Well, no, I'm
Lakey, do you want to cover that?
I would be happy to tell you exactly what they're going to do. So we established a new format, and I have had a coordination meeting with all of the staff liaisons to make sure everyone is crystal clear on the new format. And I actually got very positive feedback from both staff and their advisory committee members they had spoken with that they do feel it will be a more meaningful interaction. But as a quick review, we've asked them to prepare an 8 to 10 minute presentation. and they are to structure around 4 distinct questions. What are your 2 most impactful accomplishments for Columbia in the last year? If they did not meet during COVID, because a few did not, they can extend that to the past 2 years. And then what are the 2 biggest priorities for your advisory committee for this current year? Identify any opportunities for the CA board to better benefit from your advisory committee skills and expertise. And identify any opportunities for the CA board to better serve your advisory committee.
Can you send that to us?
Sure, yep. They're not giving that to us ahead of time. They're formatting their presentation to.
You want the questions?
Questions, what you just
Okay.
did. Can you send that?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. That's perfect. That's what I was looking for.
So I'm not sure. So the questions right now only deal with these things or I'm not sure.
You mean the questions for the advisory committees?
No. I have a question. My question is about, like I sit on the audit committee, what is an open meeting for the audit committee? And I'm asking the question because we've given the responsibility for reviewing financial statements to the audit committee, but I don't know how members of the community can watch an audit committee. So if it's not being televised or broadcast or live streamed, how can members of the community find out about the review process of the financial statements of CA?
So they are generally on our agendas. Would you prefer that the audit committee give a more thorough report out at the board meeting? Or, I mean, I'm not sure what you're suggesting.
Well, during the general meetings, it appears that we spend little time, if any, reviewing the financial statements, that there's virtually no questions asked. And the response has been that it's the responsibility of the audit committee. So I'm okay any way we want to do it. I just want the process opened up to the public.
I'm sorry, I'm
You have
still
an audit-
struggling
so-
which part.
Well, I'm okay if we do it at the board meeting or at the audit committee meeting, but if we're going to do it at the audit committee meeting, my comment is it should be something that's on Facebook Live or our YouTube channel so that residents can understand what the concerns or questions are that the audit committee have about the financial statements or the things that the audit committee thinks that the association is doing better than expected. But right now, nobody can see it.
Okay, so,
And there is concern in the community about the financial statements.
so do you have a proposal here?
The proposal would be that the audit committee meetings be open and live streamed because they're already here in this room.
So I'll step in and just clearly state that audit committee meetings are closed, which you know, obviously, as a member of the audit committee. So
No, they're
we
open.
post our quarterly financial statement. So in terms of transparency, the information is there and it is on a board agenda. The level of discussion that happens, obviously, is governed by who's participating in the meeting.
Actually, the audit committee meeting is open and then we close a section of it.
Correct.
Yeah, so you're just proposing streaming the open
The open,
section?
I don't, yeah, right, just the open
Okay.
piece.
What I wasn't clear on was
Yeah.
whether you wanted to reconstruct the way
No,
the audit
I
committee
just think that it
works.
should be
how I
open so
Okay.
that if somebody
It
wanted
is
to.
open.
So this,
You just want it
well, it
recorded.
could be, it needs
But-
to be like YouTube, we could do a YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a portion of it that's open,
the
just to be
public-
clear.
Not, I don't, yeah, the closed portion's the closed
Okay.
portion.
Okay, I wasn't
You can have two different
understanding.
dial-in numbers, or if you want to live stream it, or whatever.
Andy,
I will point out that the audit committee open agenda is posted,
yes.
so
But,
it's out on our website.
right,
And that part of the meeting is open for anyone who wishes to come.
Somebody could come down and listen to it, or?
Oh,
Yeah, there's
well,
a resident speak up section.
Yeah, there's a resident speak out section there too.
So you're just adding the,
okay, so we're not going to have that conversation now?
That's
Because
fine.
we're, but thank you, Renee, for that. I think that we can certainly look into alternatives.
What you were
that's
saying at
fine,
first.
I'm fine.
Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Wow, I don't know how to record that. That was unanimous. I don't think we take the.
I'll second it.
Okay.
I'll second the three people that moved that.
All right, any objections? All right, this meeting is adjourned